بسم الله الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه ثم أما بعد proceed. Just two clarifications because when we come up from the ruku', we are saying Sami Allahu liman hamida Rabbana lakal hamd, and then we're saying the rest of the dua. So the Rabbi al-Hamd is not in place of Sami Allahu liman hamida. The Rabbi al-Hamd is not in place of Sami Allahu liman hamida. You're coming up from ruku' and you're saying Sami Allahu liman hamida Rabbana lakal hamd. Everyone is doing this. Then you can carry on and say so much more than that. But everybody is coming up from ruku' saying Sami Allahu liman hamida Rabbana lakal hamd, and then you proceed with more if you desire, or if you wish to say more. And I said that in order for you to make your salah more like the salah of the Prophet ﷺ, learn more dua, supplication, dhikr to say during this qiyam or second qiyam or qiyam after ruku', so that you're not doing it too quickly. You're not doing it too quickly because it can take away from your tuma'nina in the entire salah. To do any part of it too quickly can take away from the integrity of the whole salah, can take away from your tuma'nina in the entire salah. The other clarification about religious nationalism, I just wanted you to not mistake this as an attack on the concept of the one ummah and one body. This is one ummah, one body. Each part of this body feels for the rest of it. I don't need to emphasize this to you. This is ABC Islam. مثل المؤمنين في توادهم وترحمهم وتعاطفهم كمثل الجسد الواحد إذا اشتكى منه عضو تداعى له سائر الجسد بالسهر والحزن. So the likeness of the believers and their compassion for one another, mercy and compassion for one another, and sympathy that they show for one another is like the one body. If one part of it suffers, or the rest of it suffers, or the rest of it shows the suffering through insomnia and fever. This is not an issue that needs my explanation or my elaboration. Okay, moving on to the next point here, which is servitude in a sujud. The abd is subsequently prescribed to say Allah is the most great, and then to fall down in prostration to the floor, to let all his limbs individually demonstrate their servitude to Allah. His forehead placed on the floor before his Lord, his face, the most honorable part of his body, comes together with the dust of the floor, and all the while his heart humbles itself to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is, if you look for any other way of showing humility, that's why the whole salah is called the prelude to the sujud. And the sujud is the act of prayer that brings you closest to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If you look for any way to show more submissiveness, more humility, more humbleness in form, in action, then sujud you cannot find. Can you? No, there is nothing that shows more humility and submissiveness than this. Then he says, moreover, when the state of the heart conforms to the state of the body in this position, which is the position of sujud, both are humble, submissive, and down to earth. It is as if the heart too prostrates to Allah along with the body. And then, then he says here on at the top of page 51, he says the reality of the prostration of the heart is its submission to Allah, and the heart is able to remain in prostration until the day of judgment. One of the righteous Salaf was asked, does the heart prostrate? He answered, indeed it does. By Allah it prostrates such that it does not raise its head even once, and remains in prostration until it meets Allah, exalted be He. He said, he said, أي والله له سجدة لا يرفع رأسه منها. أي والله له سجدة لا يرفع رأسه منها. That's Salah ibn Abdullah Tustari. That's the righteous predecessor who said this, made this statement. أي والله له سجدة لا يرفع رأسه منها حتى يلقى الله عز وجل. Yes, by Allah, the heart prostrates a prostration from which it never raises its head, or from which it never rises, from which it never rises until it meets Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The prostration of the body is basically an invitation to the heart to prostrate, a reminder, an invitation for the heart to prostrate. Because without the prostration of the heart, the prostration of the body may, if you had the intention to pray, and if you had this presence of mind at the time you started your prayer. Remember when we talked about Imam al-Ghazali in his book al-Ihya, and the chapter about the Salah and Asrar al-Salah, the secrets of the Salah, we said that when he had this discussion about the Salah being valid if you have this presence of heart at the time of takbir. According to the jurists, that if your heart was present at the time you made takbir, the first takbir, takbirat al-ihram, even if your heart thereafter was distracted, your salah would still be valid. And he had this long discussion of what this means, and he was talking about basically what he was talking about is that the fuqaha, this is not their area of expertise. Their area of expertise is not about the reward of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's not the area of anyone's expertise, fuqaha or not fuqaha. The reward of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the acceptance by Allah. The fuqaha can only say this is valid, invalid. Mujzi' ghayr mujzi'. Mujzi' means that it will suffice. Ghayr mujzi', it will not suffice. You need to repeat it. Valid means sahih. Invalid means fasid or batil. Fasid or batil means ghayr mujzi'. You need to repeat it. That's the only thing the fuqaha can say. Can the fuqaha say how much reward you will get? Absolutely not. It's all about the hearts. It's all about the acceptance by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Can the fuqaha talk about maqbool and mardud? Maqbool and mardud. Accepted and rejected. Do the fuqaha ever use these words? Do the fuqaha ever use maqbool, accepted, mardud, rejected? Absolutely not. How could they use them? How would they know what's accepted and what's rejected? They can only tell you, if you do these four arkan and wajibat and shurut, then your salah is valid, sahiha, mujzi, or mujzi'ah. It will suffice. Basically, you don't need to repeat it. That's the only thing that fuqaha can tell you. So the fuqaha would say to you, if your heart is present at the time of takbir, because if your heart is not present at the time of takbir, you don't have any presence of the heart, there is no qasd, nayyah, there is no intention whatsoever, there is no proper intention in the salah, and in this case it will not be valid. It will not be valid. But if your heart is present at the time of takbir, you know what you're doing, you know that you're doing this for the sake of Allah and not for the sake of anyone else, and you embark on the salah in this state of being, then your salah will be valid. Now you breathe life into your salah. True? You breathe life into your salah. Your salah is alive. Because your heart was present at the time you made takbir and you made the proper intention for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Have you ever seen someone who's on life support? Your salah could be just like that. You've seen people in the ICU and intensive care unit on life support. with the tube down their throat and everything, and they are completely sedated. Your salah, our salah, unfortunately, oftentimes ends up just like that, on life support. So the fact that you breathed life into your salah does not, make this salah come to fruition, does not make this salah bring about the expected result, the expected outcome from the salah. It does not mean that your salah tanha an al-fahsha wal munkar. It will stop you from aggression. It will stop you from lewdness. It will stop you from evil. It does not mean that your salah will bring about comfort to your heart. It does not mean that your salah is a form of actually salah between you and Allah, or communion between you and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It just means that it is valid, it suffices, you will not need to repeat it, but you really breathed this life into your salah, and then you left it on life support. You did not really, or your salah could be completely paralyzed. Quadriplegia is, paralysis of all four limbs. Your salah could be deaf, mute, and blind. Your salah. So, the presence of the heart in all of the actions afterwards, the heart being an active participant in the salah, after you made the takbir, it will bring about life into each part, each limb, each organ, each segment of your prayer. If you're interested in a healthy prayer, then that you need to have the heart present throughout the different segments of your prayer. Now, once the heart prostrates, Sahl ibn Abdullah Tustari is the one who said this. Sahl ibn Abdullah Tustari is one of the great, the scholars of the interior and exterior. He used to value the knowledge of the Quran and the Sunnah. He used to say to the scholars of Hadith, don't let yourselves die except with your ink pots next to you, or except holding on to your ink pots. Die not except in a state of seeking knowledge. That's what he meant. So don't be caught dead without your ink pots. So he is a righteous scholar, a scholar that is compliant with Sharia, and he was also a great scholar of the interior as well. Sahl ibn Abdullah Tustari, the one who made this statement about the sajda of the heart, that the heart has a prostration from which it never rises until it meets Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, was from the 3rd century after Hijrah. He died around 280 or something after the Hijrah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And at age 3, his maternal aunt, Muhammad ibn Siwa, taught him to say to himself, in seclusion, in privacy, Allahu Shahidi, Allahu, he taught him to say, Allahu Ma'i, Allahu Nazirun ilay, Allahu Shahidi. So, Allahu Ma'i means what? Allah is with me. Allahu Nazirun ilay means what? Allah sees me. Allahu Shahidi means what? Allah is watching me. So he told him to repeat this dhikr several times in private at age 3. And then he got used to it and he was repeating it until he started at one point to feel some effect of the dhikr on him. And from there, and certainly he taught him what it means. And from there he instilled in him this watchfulness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or this relationship or connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So could he have been 4? Maybe. The accuracy of these reports, we know that he was very young. Because when he reported this to someone, do you really remember exactly if you were 3 or 4? And people in general used, particularly during the time of the Prophet ﷺ, even this is a matter of his, it's a bit controversial, but many of the scholars say that the Prophet did not use the numbers in their exact sense, in their mathematical sense. And the Prophet used numbers in the same way the rest of the Arabs used numbers. So that is why you find a lot in the Quran and the Sunnah the mention of 40, 70, 7. These numbers were not meant for their mathematical value. They were meant as an indication. They were meant to imply the amount. So 7 implies like several. When you say several ones, or 70 implies abundance. 500, which the Arabs used to use a lot, and the Prophet ﷺ would use also, implies great abundance. So the numbers were not used for their mathematical implication as much as they were used to imply like a meaning of abundance, scarcity, abundance, great abundance, and so on. So when Sa'd ibn Abdullah Tustari says that he was 3, you could say that he was about 3. He was 4, he was 5. But it does not mean that you will necessarily comprehend what you're saying at age 3. And he didn't even say that. He said it took him time until he found sweetness to this dhikr. And it started to bring about some effect on his heart and on his relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala after a little time. This time could be a year, 2 years, 3 years. Maybe he started at age 4 and he was able to find some sweetness to the dhikr at age 6 or 7, and then it started to bring about the fullest effect at age 15. But it means that you want to start early, bringing about this realization to the children's minds that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is with you, Allah is watching you, Allah is looking at you, Allah is with you, and be mindful of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala more than anyone else. You wanted to start early so that hopefully one day we may have another Sa'd ibn Abdullah story. So in this act of sujud, he will continue to talk about the pillars of the Salah. He says the Salah is built upon 5 pillars. He did say that sujud is the ultimate form of submissiveness. But the last paragraph here on page 50, let's read this one. In this posture, it is prescribed for the abd to not have any part of his body depend on any other part for support. That is, he should avoid placing the weight of his thighs on his legs, maintain a space between his belly and his legs, and keep a space between his arms by spreading them to the sides, away from his body. This is so that each part of his physical self can individually demonstrate its slavery to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So all of this is prescribed where? In the books of fiqh. The description of the Prophet's prayer, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. So don't underestimate the importance of adherence to the way of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, because it is not haphazard. It is not without meaning, without an internal, the external form of how he prayed and how he showed us to pray is consequential, has an impact on the interior. So what is meant here is for each part, each limb, to be an active participant. Don't carry the weight of your thighs on your legs. Don't carry the weight of your trunk on your arms. So where you pray like this, you carry the weight of your trunk on your arms. No, spread them out. Leave a distance between your thighs and your belly. Leave a distance between your thighs and your legs. Leave a distance between your arms and your sides. And leave a distance between your arms and your trunk. Spread them out like this to the sides. Where each limb is an active participant. Each limb is doing its part, feeling the servitude, feeling the tiredness sometimes. Now, if you have like health issues and you want and your arm's hurting, could you deviate from this form to have more tranquility because you are in pain or you're getting too tired too fast, that you're rushing through the prayer? Could you give up some of the form for the tranquility? Yes, you could. Because ultimately the objective here is what? That it is the internal impact. And if some of the form cripples you from basically garnering the fruit of submission, of prostration, then you give up some of the form. In this case, could you bring your arms next to your trunk and carry the weight of your trunk on your arms if you want to lengthen the prostration and you can't do it otherwise? Or you can't have focus otherwise? Yes. The Imam Malik used to pray with his hands next to him, like this. And although the Malikis, they disagree over, it's a very long disagreement, and the reasons behind the disagreement are, there's just like a very lengthy discussion. This is not the time or the platform to discuss this matter, whether you put your hands on the chest like the Jumhur does and like the Hadith says, or you put them next to your body like many of the Malikis do and believe. But one of the explanations of why the Malikis do this is that Imam Malik, Imam Malik was imprisoned and tortured for some time after a certain fatwa that he made, and he had some, I don't know, he had like pain in his arms and his shoulders, whatever that he had after this, this torture. And then afterwards he started to pray with his arms hanging loose next to him, according to one explanation of why he would pray with his hands next to his body. And so in this case, despite the fact that his hands were not completely paralyzed, or he did not have like complete dislocation where he was completely unable to put his hands on his chest, but he felt more comfortable doing it this way. And in order for him to reap the benefits of the prayer, the tranquility of the prayer, he just gave up on this aspect, or this act, which is a sunnah act, to put your hands, because basically by agreement, this is not a wajib. Put your hands on your chest, you put your hands next to you. This is not going to compromise your prayer in the sense of a violation of a wajib, or a violation of a rukn or a pillar. So he felt that, to be able to have focus, let me be comfortable so that I could have focus, concentration, khushu' in my salah. And that would be fine. Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah himself, when he addressed the issue of closing your eyes in the salah, that the Prophet ﷺ disliked closing the eyes in the Salah. Why? Because it is conducive to sleepiness. It makes you sleepy. If you close your eyes, you'll eventually be sleepy. And you may also say that the Prophet ﷺ wanted us to be able to reach the peak, or he showed us that the peak is to be able to have complete focus, complete khushu', focus on your munajah with Allah, your solid conversation with Allah, despite the distractions. But until you cross that bridge, Imam ibn Qayyim says, until you cross that bridge, until you climb to that peak, until you get to that peak, if closing your eyes brings about more khushu', you may close your eyes to bring about more khushu'. Because the form should never take precedence over the substance, the meaning, the inner effect. Because ultimately that is what is intended. إِلَّا مَنْ أَتَى اللَّهَ بِقَلْبٍ سَلِيمٍ, except for one who comes back to Allah, returns to Allah with a heart that is sound. That is the highest objective. So, put things in perspective. We do value the teachings of our Prophet ﷺ. We do respect them. We want to adhere to them. And we want to be very meticulous in doing this. But that should not also keep us from realizing that the ultimate prize here is the inner effect. It is the state of the heart, not the state of the body. So if there is a conflict, you give precedence to the tuma'nina and to the state of your heart in the prayer. Yes?
Is it true that last how say this is fine as long as you don't tell others to do it or promote it? Right? Like, don't make it seem part of the deen.
The perfect way is the way that the Prophet ﷺ prayed. And I am saying that for some people, some people, for instance, can't sit down in the tashahhud like the Prophet used to sit down in the tashahhud. And if they try to do it the way the Prophet ﷺ used to do it, they will be in pain throughout their tashahhud. And you could tell them, you'll get used to it. Just go through it. Some people try it. I personally tried it. I continued to have pain in my toes every time I did it. It just wasn't working. My toes did not get accustomed to the way the Prophet ﷺ used to sit. My body is stiff. I don't have enough flexibility. I have a problem with my muscle. Whatever I have, it just didn't work for me. Like I tried to do it, and I had to spend years on it. But it just doesn't work for some people. So in this case, you go through the prayer in pain, and you feel that it is detracting from your khushu'. It is detracting from your concentration. You're in pain. If you're in pain, you're going to have less concentration. Or you give up that sunnah for the greater prize, which is the greater sunnah. Because the state of the interior, isn't that the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ also? Tuma'nina in Salah, isn't that the sunnah of the Prophet? Isn't that the way of the Prophet? Which sunnah should be given precedence here? The form of my body during this particular movement, or the tuma'nina of my heart? Which of the two sunnahs should take precedence? If there is a conflict, and I'm not saying that there would always be a conflict, or there would usually be a conflict. Usually there will not be a conflict. But if you yourself, individually, have a conflict, like every time you open your eyes up, you're distracted, we will tell you that you will not get there to the top until you do what the Prophet ﷺ did it and prescribed it. The fact that you're distracted means that you are weak. it is a weakness. There is weakness in your heart, there is weakness in your spirituality, there is weakness in your religious commitment that makes you distracted. You're standing before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and you're distracted by someone who's passing by, or distracted by the kids, or playing, or or distracted by the decorations in the masjid, which I told you about. But it is a manifestation of your weakness. So when you close your eyes, you're not saying that I am closing your eyes because I am better than the Prophet ﷺ. No, you're saying because I did not get to that peak yet. Because I did not get to that peak yet. And for the time being, until I cross that bridge, until I get to that peak, I need to close your eyes to have concentration. So anyway, you certainly don't go out and tell people to close their eyes. It's about whether they need it or they don't need it. It's an individual, it's tailored, it's custom for for every individual. Okay, so he says here the Salah is built upon 5 pillars. This points to the worship, humility, and submissiveness. But the 5 pillars that he was talking about is the second paragraph. He says, a Salah is built upon 5 pillars: recitation, qira'ah, standing, bowing down, prostration, sujud, remembrance, dhikr. It is tacitly called after these actions, like if in the Quran, and I want you to read those verses at home. قُمِ اللَّيْلَ إِلَّا قَلِيلًا. Allah called the Salah here by Qiyam. وَقُومُوا لِلَّهِ قَانِتِينَ. And then وَقُرْآنَ الْفَجْرِ إِنَّ قُرْآنَ الْفَجْرِ كَانَ مَشْهُودًا. Allah called the Salah an act of recitation. وَارْكَعُوا مَعَ الرَّاكِعِينَ means pray. But Allah called the Salah by the ruku'. فَسَبِّحْ بِحَمْدِ رَبِّكَ وَكُن مِّنَ السَّاجِدِينَ. Allah called the Salah by the sujud. وَاسْجُدْ وَاقْتَرِبْ. Allah called the Salah after the sujud. يا أيها الذين آمنوا إذا نودي للصلاة من يوم الجمعة فاسعوا إلى ذكر الله. Then hasten to the remembrance of Allah. So Allah called the Salah dhikrullah. So the Salah is called after the sujud, the ruku', the dhikr, the qiyam, and the recitation. So qiyam, recitation, ruku', sujud, and dhikr. These are the 5 pillars of the Salah. In the Quran, Allah calls the Salah after each one of these 5 pillars. So when he says warka'u, he's saying pray, but he's using ruku' to basically refer to the Salah, because each one of these is representative of the Salah. Then the last paragraph here on page 53, he says the most honorable action in Salah is prostration. And the most honorable dhikr in Salah is the recitation of al-Fatiha. The first surah that was revealed to the Prophet ﷺ is which one? Surah al-Alaq. Iqra. Surah Iqra is the first surah. And you'll find the latifa here, which is like a subtlety that Imam Qayyim pointed to. He says that Surah al-Alaq started by Iqra and ended by wasjud waqtarib. Surah al-Alaq started by Iqra, recite, and ended by wasjud waqtarib, prostrate and come closer. So it started by the beginning of the Salah and ended by the end of the Salah. And the end of the Salah, which is sujud, is the culmination of the Salah, as if the rest of the Salah was a prelude to this act of sujud. So he says here at the end, thus the structure, this is towards the end of this chapter on page 54, thus the structure of the unit, each rak'ah in the Salah is composed accordingly, just like Surah al-Alaq. It starts with recitation and ends in prostration. I was hoping that we would cover some more today, but we ran out of time. And we promised last time that we would have 10 to 15 minutes at the end for questions and answers.